Okay, for this Beyond the Basics video, I'm gonna make a point from cradle to grave, or from beginning to end, and talk in detail about some things: platform preparation, strategy, etc. Mostly, I mean, it's mostly just ad lib. So, well, I'm going to use this piece of knife river right here. I think it's an excellent piece for this subject. I'm going to make an agate basin out of it. First thing, you know, that I'm going to do when I look at this is see where the point lies. So, you know, agate basins were real narrow. So I always had this saying that you can make an agate basin out of anything. So rocks that are really good and have, you know, a rare or something, or just, well, good quality but are real narrow, it's like, well, I know I can always make an agate basin out of that. But the first thing I'm going to do is look and see kind of where the point lies. So I've got this big knob on this end, shallow spot, thick spot there, a twist here. It's obvious that the point kind of lies in a plane from about point here to the base down to there. So I'm going to remove the humps on this end and work to that end. Point will probably lie right about in there. I put a dot right there because that's where I anticipate the tip being. One thing I'll probably try to do during the reduction of this is try to build platforms to where I can take off tool flakes. I'll first start with this Hammerstone. It's a, you know, it's my creek buddy. I use it a lot. You know, when I probably use this rock whenever I collected this piece of knife river. I'll use it in the early stages, and, you know, probably pretty quick go to using this. This is kind of my favorite mid to late stage Hammerstone. It's not too soft, it's not too hard. I think it pretty good average grit for most use. This is a harder piece of sandstone that I'll use for platform preparation. Even though this video is not really about how to make an agate basin, I'm going to talk about agate basins a little bit. These are a couple of casts. This is a brand new, like first stage appears to be anyway, agate basin. Typically the cross section along its length is, well, the cross section everywhere is very, just almost dang near perfect. You know, this thing is a projectile point, so if it goes in the haft and it's not in line with the shaft, if it's off just a little bit, you know, you've got this thing that's hafted like this, crooked in there a little bit. Whenever it hits the animal or anything, there's going to be sideways components of force that's going to cause this thing to break. So it's critical to get the hafting element just right, and we want this thing to be as straight as a string. Let's see, typically they're ground a third of the way up the point. This one is pretty close. It's ground to right about there where my fingernail is. These are designed so that whenever a lot of times if they break, they'll just break a little bit off, and then you can touch it up and reuse it, and they just keep working it all the way down until there's nothing left. Kind of like this guy right here. This is not a new agate basin. This is a used up and discarded agate basin that was huge when it was new. The grinding stops right there where my fingernails are at. So if you take that typical rule where this is, the base is ground a third of the length, then this thing was, you know, that long, and this was hafted all the way up to there, so it was used up, discarded, and then thrown away. These are some artifacts. This is a piece of Burlington. Both of those casts were Burlington. I think this is Burlington, I think that's Avon, and those three are Knife River. This is a different style where you see this kind where they've got this little concave base in them. This one's rather crude, in my opinion, for an agate basin. And interestingly enough, it's not ground. It's got a big crack right there. That's an impact fracture, there's no doubt. This is rather flat on this side and pretty concave on this side, and the cross section is all over the board. This is a real fine piece. It's ground to about right there on both sides, so it broke off very near to the base. This one looks like it is not brand new, but pretty new. It looks like it may have been resharpened a little bit from the tip. It has a real nice cross section, a little thick at the tip on this one, probably from resharpening. This is a very fine piece here as well. It looks to be brand new, probably very thin, wide. That's not the kind that I'm going to make today. Ground a little bit down here, so it broke off at the base. These are artifacts that were found in North Dakota, not by me, but by a friend of mine, Dale Miller, when we were collecting this rock up there. This is a super fine base of an agate basin. It's ground all the way down. It's not ground on the end. There's tiny little, sometimes there's a little bit of flakes from the base, but predominant flaking is going to be from the lateral margins. I'd say probably on 95% of them at least. You know, it's got a nice taper going up. This is a midsection piece. There's no grinding on it. It's real narrow. Random flaking, beautiful cross section, nice convex cross section. This is the style that I'm going to make, but it's going to be a little bit wider than that. Here's another piece. This is it's a midsection as well. That's the tip direction. Very thin, nice cross section, almost diamond. Random flaking. I guess I'll get started. My initial strategy on this is this has got a twist, so therefore a bevel, and so I'll take a few flakes from here that way, and you know, that way too, or at least that's the end intent. I'm going to leave this alone in here. I'm going to bevel this that way and try to knock some tool flakes off in those regions. So I'm just going to start with that. On an agate basin, you can afford to lose a lot of width. I probably should talk about some of the advanced stuff here. So, you know, here I am hitting on the end. So the aim is important. I've got this thing supported up the length of this by just sticking my finger up there and letting it rest along meaty sections of my hand, and where I've got some definite support right where I want the flake to come off. You know, I talk about that a lot, like in the core videos. So I've got that right in there, and I'm always aiming to where I want the flake to come off. So when I'm letting my hand kind of, when I hit the rock, and if I was doing it in slow motion, when I hit the rock, I want the rock to give a little bit and bounce back, while this just kind of dead falls away. One thing about Knife River is this cortex, this white cortex, it's just real old patina. It reacts differently when you hit it than the parent material. It's real slick, and it initiates differently than the parent material does. So just keep that in mind when you're working Knife River and you're starting off new on this rock. You know, the more advanced stuff that I'm going to be talking about is the bulk of it will be in the later stages of this, where I'm trying to build the perfect body on this point. And so I'm going to do things in a very strategic manner and build platforms exactly the way I want them relative to the flake that I want to take. after taking that flake, it left a ridge here, but it's protruding right here. If you missed and hit that and it was in a later stage or something, then you'd really cause a bad hinge in this area. You can fix that easily by just scrunching right in the bulb force, so it really kind of isolates your ridges a little bit too. So I'm just going to do that. We can see how it looks right now. See how I moved that out of the way? Now there's a lot less risk of me hitting that. And I don't want to hit it there yet. It's important to look and imagine the flake before you take it, because every flake is custom basically. You've got a certain angle and a certain force you've got to apply in order to get the exact flake you want. This is not flint knapping blindly. We're trying to predict flakes here accurately, hopefully with 100% accuracy. And if you don't look and see what needs to happen and you just blindly hit it because there's a platform there, all you're going to do is introduce problems that you're going to have to work out. You know, I wasn't trying to blast one all the way across there. I just want it to do a certain thing. With really good rock and a really good hammerstone, on some flakes you don't even need to scrunch and then a braid. You can just do this brushing effect where I hold my fingers underneath it and it kind of helps hold the edge together, and then you can hit it. I can't believe how much that spread out. It's awesome. I'm not going to hit it right there first. The flake spreads out along this flat spot, and it's more difficult to get through that hump of mass. This is protruding, and it's along that ridge. It'll be real nice. This will be a nice flake. Didn't hit it hard. Some of these I'll be able to use as camp flakes, and you know, that one would make an arrowhead. If I go ahead and turn this that way now, then I've got a way to come back and get some more of this hump out, and then I can come back and I'll have a real easy attack on this. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to blend into this hinge when I turn it. Now earlier I mentioned to look at the flake that you want to take and how important that is. It's also just as important, if not more, to see the two contact points between your hammerstone or your flake removal tool, so that covers everything including pressure flakers, right, and indirect methods, but the two contact points between your flake removal tool and the rock. That creek walking video is an excellent video for watching that, because I'm working pretty quickly, flipping over and hitting. I look to see the flake I'm taking, and then I make contact, take the flake. That contact, you know, I'm adjusting that contact to get everything right to take that flake. And then when I take the flake, I'm looking to see, did I get what I got? Or did I get what I wanted to get? And then I'm also looking at the next one at the same time, and then flip back over, make contact, and take the flake, and just repeat that. You know, if you create an area like this, which you're gonna do sometimes, don't start attacking it right away. I mean, this applies to all flint knapping, not just abo flint knapping. Save it for when you got a good chance to get it, and you know you're gonna get it. This is ugly to hit right here. I'm gonna hit that spot right there, and just try to get something short that if I do that, I think I'll be able to create something off the delta to better attack that. Find the right spot on my Hammerstone that gets in there. Make eye contact. Just like that. I don't always clean up after the deltas, but sometimes it's a good idea to at least clean them up a little bit, because it's a weak spot where that thing can break. Now, if I can get in there, get the right flake there, might help. I'm going to make a platform right there that's just going to be small, that it's going to help me get in there, I hope. This was a heck of a little trouble spot here, but we're getting through it. This is going to be the defining flake here. There. Now I feel a lot safer about that base now. The cortex was real crappy down there. Alright, now see how after working this is exposed. I can get rid of probably a whole lot of that. Got a nice delta here. That's why I like to leave the deltas alone. Don't remove them. You might need it because it's thick in that. The edge is thick in that area, so that means you can use it to strike. Even though, you know, well, Knife River is such a good rock, pure rock, that you don't even need thick platforms. Hammerstones, you know, thin platforms work so nicely on this stuff. I'm going to try to angle it a little bit that direction. So take some, rearrange the direction from here. The cortex on this piece is driving me bananas. And that's because it's so narrow, though. right in this area from there to there, the angle is good up here. It's not too steep, so there's no reason. And let's see, I want to move my center line or my edge that way. So if I want to take flakes here and then bevel this way, then really my midline or my edge will stay low. So since my angle isn't too steep, I can scrunch this direction to thicken the edge and then take a flake. I'll show you. And I think I'm gonna take a flake right here first. Oops. No, it's fine. Same thing here. Okay, see how I haven't moved it that way much, but I moved it that way a little bit and thickened the edge. Now there's plenty there to grab with the Hammerstone. Supporting long pieces with a Hammerstone, you know, I could probably really support. This one's not so long that I probably couldn't use my hand almost all the time. But it's no different than anything else. When, you know, any other tool, in my opinion, you know, you still don't want to hit it too hard. You know, as long as you're not hitting it too hard and you have it supported right, you can hit off the ends. But basically I've got just the butt of that. I'm not pressing into it real hard, and it's not just sitting there where it can flop around. It's just got enough there to sustain it. So this should be a good flake. I'm going to support it in my hand. Yeah, I got rid of a lot of thickness. Okay, this is borderline steep, so I definitely don't want to hit up on the plane. And this is not a critical flake. I don't need to take this right now, but so I just like I did here, I scrunched this way to move my platform up, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to catch the edge, and you know, with like the center part of my Hammerstone that's protruding out. Just barely hit it. See, the bulb was nice there. It didn't get too deep. Supporting the tip on my belly. Just, I don't know, it's just a habit when I'm hitting near the ends. I think my approach now is this. I don't have any real good angles of attack to get into this guy just yet. I don't want to create a concave portion in my edge. I always want that to be sticking out. So if I go after it when I'm done, I'll have something a little concave. But if I, you know, take a major flake here and then start working on this end again, and I'll lose a little bit of width as I work up this piece, and then maybe do the same thing, you know, from the tip down, and that'll expose this a little bit better, and it'll create easier access. I'm a firm believer in waiting until the moment's right and not forcing anything. Angle one down there a little bit, like that. This is concave a little bit right in there, so I'm gonna hit this first. I have to be careful on that. The platforms, if I hit it in the wrong spot, I'll definitely get an ugly flake. There. Now, see, that concave spot's gone because this flake traveled over that way. It's not ready to hit. If I hit that right now, yeah, it would probably be okay. But because the part that's sticking out the most is close to that adjacent flake, there's a good chance it'll rip and hinge in that direction. So, like I mentioned earlier, move my platform over a little bit by cleaning out that delta, and then I can take a back flake. It's not all necessary, I just like to get the flake I want, so I try not to hit platforms that, you know, that aren't right. Now I've got something that I think I can get with predictability. Oh yeah. Nice. I'm going to turn this edge from here down to there, but I'm not doing it blindly. As I do this, I'm looking to make sure I'm creating a spot that I can hit. I don't want something too steep. Or too thin. Now I'll grind this area here. And this abrading is more to, it's not like carborundum where it removes a whole lot of material. It doesn't remove hardly any material at all, and that's why scrunching correctly is so important. What this is doing is basically flattening any like protrude, you know, like little tits or something sticking out, or little flakes, tiny little steps that are right on the edge. That's all this is doing. I also strategically choose different areas of my hammerstone throughout the entire flintknapping process, and it's why this wears round, because sometimes I'm looking for a facet, sometimes I'm looking for a corner of a facet like up there, sometimes I'm looking for a spot that protrudes in the middle, or sometimes I want a big wide kind of flat spot. Like in this case, I want one that's kind of a little bit flat, but on this one, it is so important to only hit the flake as hard as you need to hit it to release, or to get the flake you want. In an area like this where that ridge is right there, if I hit that too hard, there's a chance I could really screw that up. Look at that. Just right through it. As if it wasn't even there. Okay, hopefully this will get rid of the rest of that crack. Yeah, it's gone. I just barely hit that. Just enough to get it to release. And this should be a nice flake. There was a crack right there. Still is a crack right there. It's those little cracks like that that you don't know about that can just kill you. That's why it's important to support well. This edge is a little thicker. So support here. Trying to support as much of the blade as possible. Got my finger underneath where I want to hit it. Not hitting it hard. Just nice and soft. Choosing a corner of my hammerstone here because I don't want to hit that. Finger support underneath. Like that. Yeah. Just gonna remove most of this square edge. There. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm still going to continue with the selective random process. I want to build the right kind of body on this, and I want it to be perfectly blended. I want nice body on this end, or on both sides, from end to end. Taper towards the tip, taper towards the base a little bit. It's better to do that at the percussion stage. When you start pressure flaking, you don't want to start chasing humps. It's difficult. So I'm not going to attack any of these leftover areas from getting rid of the large pieces of mass. I'm just going to work selective random and find the high spots. In this stage, it's real critical to not screw up, so I'm really going to be taking my time. That was such a nice little blender. I chose Knife River for this project because I wanted it to show, I knew it would show up really well in the video. So there's little isolated bevel from there to there. I like to work from the end in instead of taking the flake here first if I can, because you could end up with more mass right on the end, and it can be unsafe or risky, you know what I'm saying. This area right here is too high. I mean, I could get this flake, but what it's going to do is it's going to leave a deep bulb and it'll cause the edge to be really thin for taking a flake this way. So I'm going to re-scrunch it and move the platform more that way, take the flake, then there should be enough edge thickness left there that whenever I create the platform coming back this way, that I'll be able to get what I want to get there. Sometimes it appears to look good, but you don't always know until you brush it. That should be good. See that area right there on my hammerstone? I was just brushing that, and it's pitted too much. So when I brush it, I can tell that, you know, that's not an area that I want to strike a fine platform on. Maybe if it was an earlier stage, it wouldn't matter. But here's the difference between a bad brush and a good brush. Here's a bad one. And then here's a good one. Smoother. Hear the difference? If you hit with that pitted area on a fine platform, it changes the angle of impact, and so therefore you can get a bad flake. I think I'm going to take this moment to explain the different ways to use the hammerstone. Of course, you know, this is beyond the basics, so we know that we let the hammerstone do the work. Let the mass of the hammerstone do the work. There's this other little term that I call effective mass, and see if I can demonstrate it or explain it. If I just drop this, the force that it creates uses the entire mass of the stone. So it's using its total effective mass. That can change anywhere from center of mass out to the very edge. So I like to explain things in extremes. So I explained one extreme where it uses the most effective mass, or the total effective mass. Now I'm going to swing my line. Imagine that it's way out on the very edge. I'm going to demonstrate this on something else. I'll demonstrate it on this piece. So if I was to use pretty much the smallest or close to the smallest effective mass, that's using a very small amount of effective mass. Now I can use somewhere in between. So let's say I'm brushing here to take a flake. See how that line is in, that line right there that I scribed on there is in line with my strike angle. I only used a part of the mass. So I call these, like, if I use the total effective mass, is like a punch flake. And most everything other than that is kind of like a brushing stroke. So that when you're going along and you're taking flakes, you know, that thing is constantly moving in there. So it's the idea that I want you to, you know, think about and practice it. So it lets you swing faster when you're using only a small piece of the mass, and slower when you're using the total mass. Momentum is, one way to describe momentum is to, if something has a lot of momentum, it's hard to stop it. Like a train has a lot of momentum. A feather falling doesn't have hardly any momentum at all, so it's real easy to stop that. Another way to explain momentum is mass times the velocity that it's moving. So if you to use the largest amount of momentum in this, you use the total mass. To use a small amount of momentum, you use a partial of this mass. So anyway, that's enough of the technical stuff, but I wanted to try to, this is a Beyond the Basics video, so I want to try to explain the different ways to use your Hammerstone. So I'm always using the weight of this. I'm letting it do the work. It can also change like this too, like if you sliced a corner of this off, then that's the effective mass that I'm using. Like right now, if you look straight down on that, sometimes I want my platform low, and sometimes I want it high, and sometimes I want it right in the middle. This one is low because I want it to go beyond the center line. And now these are typical reasons, right? If I was doing Clovis overshot, I want it to be very near to the center line most of the time, so it comes out on the center line on the other side. And if I really want to overshoot a lot, then I have my platform really low. Remember that you're going to have a bulb of force left over when you take the flake. You don't want that all over the place on your piece in the finished stages. You want it right in the middle, so you have to accommodate for that. So you're trying to get the flake you want and the initiation point, or what's left over, to be in the right place as well. So you have to think of both of those at the same time. I rest my hand on my leg a lot. It's not necessary. Typically Hammerstones don't like rigid support, hard support. You want it to be able to give a little bit. But you can accommodate for a lot of that in your swing speed. Just slow down a little bit. Here's my typical strategy whenever I work a continuous platform. I took a flake. Now I'll just scrunch the delta out of the way. Give a little bit of a grind. That gives it a little isolated spot. Do the same thing. Clean off the delta. Gives me a little spot. Nice little brushing stroke. So this mass is larger than that mass. I'm going to take this one first. Main thing when you're hitting on the ends is, make sure you hit it hard enough to get the flake. Or else you're just gonna have problems. Ooh, well, that should have released. That's one of those signs where you knew you hit it hard enough, it should have released. So don't hit it harder. There. This is a low platform. You have to be careful here. I think I'm going to try to use the center of my Hammerstone. Put my finger under it and hit high. Ooh. I stopped because I heard flakes come off when I was brushing. That's another good reason why you need to brush. That was like a Tiger Woods stop in mid-swing. It would have just crushed it, and then I wouldn't have got, you know, I would have had to work around it. It would have sucked. This has got to work. Yay! Here's what I'm going to do down here. The last flakes that were taken on this side, but I want to take more flakes on this side. This is what I usually do. I go in between the thick areas on the edge, and scrunch, make isolations where those deltas are at. And then braid back down. It's just I'm going to take that flake first. I'm going to aim a little bit on this one. That sounded terrible. Oh. No, it was... I wonder why it sounded terrible. It was perfect. I think I'm going to be done with the percussion. I got it pretty good. There's everything looks to me like it's going to blend to a nice ridge. And I still have plenty of width left for pressure flaking. And it'll all be just selective random. I want it to be as straight as possible, so I'll keep that in mind as I'm blending to the ridge. I'll start pressure flaking on it next. Love Knife River. That's a good piece too. Okay, I'm ready to start pressure flaking this now. My other piece of antler was worn down to the nubs, even with a spacer in there. Let's see, for a quick minute I'll talk about how this is made. So I took a half round rasp and rounded out just a groove around the end of this stick, drilled a hole in the bottom, wrapped it with rawhide. I don't use any set screws or anything. It's just friction fit. It doesn't slide on me, and even when it does, if I do make it too small, I'll stick that kind of like inside in the end, and it's like a shim. It's just a leather shim, and that really helps hold it tight. Sometimes I can extend the life of my antler pressure flakers by I put a spacer. This is way too big of one, but here's one right here, and I think I have, yeah, here's an even smaller one. So I'll put that in first and then put my tool on top of that, and I can get that much more use out of that tool. And you know, this thing it's got cracks in it from applying a lot of pressure that it split the wood, but that thing has never come apart. I can't wait till this thing gets real dark, orange dark. It's a piece of bow dark that I used a flake to clean all the bark off of. I saved some of the flakes from the Percussion. I just wanted to show that, you know, these are different kinds of flakes than you would find in the Paleo period. You know, to me, Agate Basin is a transitional Paleo period from Clovis to Archaic. So the methodology is, at least the reduction strategy, is near the same. I mean, this looks pretty Paleo. The difference, the main major difference, is that they're not overshot flakes. There's a lot of big flakes and a lot of guitar pick shaped flakes as well, which is classic Clovis. But because Clovis period, you know, the flakes that they took off were made into tools. The major goal for the Hammerstone work was to get the thickness in the middle like I wanted it. I want the right thickness, and I want a slight taper towards the tip, slight taper towards the base. I think what I'm going to do first is just go in and flip the edge everywhere, because it's real dull from using a Hammerstone. And trust me, you don't want to try to take flakes off of it, off of a ground dull edge. It's not to say that you can't, because you can. It's just that you can't, you can't predict it as well. I see a lot of people using antler pressure flakers and their little sandstone abrader or a carborundum abrader or something, and that's okay if that's what they want to do. But if your goal is to do all abo work, I mean, they didn't use that. They didn't need to. I mean, I'm going to demonstrate it here that you don't need it. I'm going to use a spacer like this, because antler likes to hinge right at the very end of the termination. So, I experimented a lot with Edens. I tried many different kinds of supports and blockings and whatnot, and it turned out in the end that the best ones were the ones that came off into air. And I'm going to do that with this one too. When you hear that double scrunch, toot toot, that's usually an indication of a bad flake. You just want one crispy sound coming off, not crunching. Like that. When you're using a spacer, and when you're not, but especially when you are, you're taking a flake right in a open spot. So, I mean, you can cause enough bending force there to break it. So, I want most of my pressure to be here on that spacer, and not where I'm taking the flake. That'll help reduce your breakage. Pressure flaking is no different than percussion in that you aim the pressure to the end of your flake, where you want the flake to terminate, and that you also want to see what you're doing, not just blindly take flakes. Just like with the Hammerstone, I look to see what I need to get and exactly where my tool needs to be placed, and then aim where you want the flake to come off to terminate, and you're golden. It's not a snapping release of energy either. It's a slow push until it releases. If you have everything set up right, the edge thickness, the angle, the amount of edge you're grabbing with the antler, you'll come off perfectly. Such a nice little blender that guy was. A little bit of a concave spot right there, which is bad, no matter what kind of flake removal you're doing. But with antler pressure, jeez, that thing can hinge right there so easy. So what I'm going to do, just like I always do with any other tool, is I want my initiation point to be higher. If I go high enough that way, then I'll create a little bit more edge or a little bit more flake thickness right there, and it'll be enough to push through. There. And you don't want your platform too thick, too strong. You don't need much, but the danger in having a really strong platform. One that's too strong is lip flake. Lip flakes are flint knappers' enemy when they're finishing. Another thing to keep a close eye out on is where that spacer is placed. If you get it too far back here, oh man, then you roll it, you can push off the edge. I've done that so many times with Daltons. You could do it here too. You push real hard right here, you can roll part of this off, and a lot of times you don't even know it until, you know, a lot of times you don't know it right away. It's frustrating. Okay, I kind of got this first side blended in. Just hit the ridges. I haven't done much on this side, and I need to do that. And put some more taper on the base, both in width and thickness. I got rid of a lot of edge thickness now, so I should be able to better control some of these, the release of some of these flakes. I like that thinner edge so much better. When you're pressure flaking these, or anything really, comfort is everything. If it's not comfortable in your hand, it's going to be tough trying to get what you want. Well, I got it finished. End up just 1/16 of an inch under 7 3/4. There's a tiny bit of cortex left on both ends, so really maximize the length. The thickness I like pretty well. It's real smooth, got a nice taper down on the base, got a nice taper down on the tip, and you do see some percussion scars left. They're mostly on this edge. It's real nice and translucent. I can't see it, but I ground the base a third of the way up. This side has a good grind. I need to do this side some more because, well, the sun's about to go down. I definitely wanted to get a shot of it. You definitely see these kind. I mean, you see all kinds of variants of them, you know, where there's just all different kinds of flaking on them. But anyway, that's it.